The scapegoat survivor's mental frame after narcissistic abuse. Someone who had survived narcissistic abuse as the scapegoat in his family of origin recently described what it was like for him to play his favorite sport, basketball. And we'll call this person Steph, no relation to Curry. And again, this person is entirely fictional, just used for the purpose of illustration. But Steph loved shooting baskets and playing in pickup games with his friends since he was 5 years old. He recalled how something would just feel good and correct to him and in his body when he was on the basketball court at such a young age. And Steph's experience in his home was completely the opposite. He felt like an unwelcome alien amongst his parents and siblings, and he always had to watch his back to see, what he would be accused of that would lead him to getting into trouble next. So he had these two wildly divergent realities between how he was in essence being dehumanized at home and blamed for any and everything in his family versus the appreciation he experienced with his teammates for being able to pass and score so effectively on the court. Steph would describe his inner experience when he plays basketball, and it revealed how he had to reconcile or attempt to reconcile these two divergent realities. And he explained, I always think I'm about to make a mistake on the court, and it's a surprise to me every time I do something well. Sometimes I'm amazed at how different the track in my head is compared to what I'm actually doing on the court. It's really hard to reflect on my skills as a basketball player and my accomplishments because I fear that if I think too much about what I can do, then I won't be able to do it anymore. Like I'll think of some problem in my shooting or passing and obsess over it, and it'll ruin my game. Well, I'm bringing up this example because Steph has a mental frame about who he is that opposes how he is actually living in the world. And the American Psychological Association defines a mental frame as a set of rules by which an individual perceives and evaluates the world. Well, in today's video, I want to talk about what it's like to have to live with a mental frame that's incongruent with how you actually live in the world. And next, I'll explain how surviving narcissistic abuse as the scapegoat can bring this about. And last, I want to talk about the process of changing your mental frame to better match how you actually live in the world. And here's a sort of spoiler alert, but it's not a one-person job, but one that happens in relationship to other safe people. Well, my name's Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in San Francisco, California, and I specialize in helping individuals recover from narcissistic abuse through individual therapy and my online course and accompanying private Facebook community. And to do this, we take a three-pronged approach to recovery that involves making sense of what happened, gaining distance from the narcissistic abuser, and living in defiance of the narcissist rules. And today's video falls under the category of living in defiance of the narcissist rules. And if you happen to be a scapegoat survivor of a narcissistic parent or partner, then I really encourage you to check out my free ebook on this topic. It's called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat. And it really goes into other important aspects of what it's like to be in the shoes of the scapegoated child or partner, and also kind of details some of the self-limiting beliefs about yourself that you may have to adopt in order to survive narcissistic abuse, and also talks about why the narcissistic personality is so geared to put those closest to them down. And I think that along with today's video, this ebook can help you realize how none of this abuse was actually your fault, but was rather the sort of inevitable product of the narcissist's own emotional and psychological problems or pathologies. And you can find the link to the ebook in the description below or by clicking here. And if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button and turn notifications on so that you're alerted when I post new videos on these kinds of topics. Well, Steph's experience on the basketball court and the wildly divergent narrative of what's happening in his mind can be a common experience after surviving narcissistic abuse as a scapegoat. Others may find themselves to be very competent at work or school, yet constantly tell themselves that they're one mistake away from ruining it all. Or, you may get the feedback of being a very good friend, parent, or partner, yet always feel like you're one step away from betraying, disappointing, or failing these people. And this conviction that one is not as good as one seems to be is not easily given up. That this experience can frustrate, I think understandably, the scapegoat survivor. It also makes fraught the experience of doing what you're good at. Although Steph loved basketball, the experience of playing always carried a state of anxiety, sort of unease, and even a mild depression that he had to tolerate in order to play. So why does it feel so bad to do what you're good at when the mental frame is sort of at odds with how you are in the world? Well, the reason is that in order to survive narcissistic abuse as a scapegoat, it's typically necessary to adopt a mental frame about who you are in the world that corresponds to the distorted and devaluing messages you received from your family. And, there's pressure from within and without to do this. From within, the scapegoat must forge some sort of bond with the narcissistic parent just in order to survive. And from without, the narcissistic parent sees the scapegoat child as a threat to that parent's fragile and artificially inflated self-worth. So the parent relocates his or her own sense of worthlessness into the scapegoated child and influences that child to adopt that worthlessness as the child's own. So in order to share a reality with the parent, which is really the first step in forming a bond to the parent, the child's got to internalize a mental frame about themselves that in essence says the child is no good, is undeserving, and maybe too is defective. And at the same time, the scapegoated child has to go on living, and certainly does. And in the process of sort of going on living, the child will show who he or she actually is in the world, and at times encounter accurate feedback about themselves and, by others outside the family. And these moments are where the mental frame needed to survive at home often can become most conspicuous to the child. And one fictional client, for example, remembered winning spelling bees week after week and then accidentally misspelling a word and then telling his friends at lunch that he was stupid. And he remembered how upset his friends were to hear him say this. And at the time, their reaction was very confusing to him. But he was being treated as though he was unimportant and a problem by his narcissistic mother at home. So the feelings of esteem and pride that were brought on by his talent in the spelling bee really made him confused. And as this client went on to succeed in school, he described it as a very tension-filled experience because he'd be studying on top of this mental frame about himself that said he was stupid, in effect. So very similar to how Steph's experience on the basketball court was described. So how you can change your mental frame to better match who you are in the world. Well, I think this concept of a mental frame versus who you are in the world points to the purpose of therapy as a profession. I mean, since we all live within our mental frames, they deserve our attention and will likely influence the quality of life we experience, for better or worse. So when our mental frames are aligned with who we actually are, then life should feel authentic, empowered, and meaningful. But it's when your mental frame is at odds with who you are that life can feel tense, unsafe, and flat. Well, here's where the process of therapy can be useful because the intention is for the client to develop a working relationship with someone, a therapist who's trustworthy, compassionate, and motivated to help the client align their mental frame with who they actually are. And I bring up therapy because the process of changing your mental frame as a scapegoat survivor of narcissistic abuse isn't exclusively a one-person job. Your mental frame of being defective and or undeserving was established as the only way possible to eke out a small amount of safety for yourself in your narcissistic family. And this mental frame saved you from having no relationship to anyone in your family, a far worse experience than having a bad relationship to someone in your family. So here's how therapy and other supportive relationships can function to help you relinquish this old mental frame about yourself and feel safer in adopting a new, more accurate frame of who you are. In essence, a therapist can help you notice and identify how the old painful mental frame of who you are operates in your life and hopefully respond in ways that convey to you that in the therapeutic relationship, you're not required to believe such things about yourself in order for it to continue and in order for you to experience goodwill from the other person, the therapist in this example. In effect, you get to learn the opposite of what was initially instilled in establishing this painful mental frame, that you get to experience continued connection to someone else while also noticing and accepting what's good about you. And for the scapegoat survivor, the only way to notice what is good about oneself is often to be completely alone. Such information threaten the needed bonds to the narcissistic family for the child, and therapy, ongoing therapy can offer the opposite lesson. And that's not to say that educating yourself on the topic is not also effective, but I do believe that both are required. That is, education, information, along with the actual experience of a new relationship where this safety to kind of know who you actually are is afforded and gets to be experienced and kind of accumulated, so that the entire kind of organism of oneself gets to know it's now safe to know and adopt a mental frame of who you actually are. In the spirit of shifting your mental frame, you might check out Module 2 in my online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse, where I go into great depth about how the scapegoat survivor's self has to essentially split itself in order to maintain a bond with a narcissistic parent while holding that scapegoat survivor's real self hostage as the one to blame and deserving of the parent's narcissistic abuse. And I think that this module can help you cultivate compassion and patience towards yourself as you work to change your mental frame, because it highlights the no-win position you were put in with the narcissistic parent and affords ways and strategies to try to correct that. Well, I hope you found today's video useful, and I want to thank again everyone for your continued engagement with the channel and support of one another, and I look forward to posting again next Sunday. Take care.